Hi there. I'm still not done talking about things. This is unusual for me, but I um, so I found out that Dave Withers tried to frame me with a coloring book in the fireplace of my home, my former home. And I couldn't figure out why he did it. It took me a long time to figure out why he would try to frame me, why he would try to frame me with a coloring book. Well, it's because Dave Withers has a history, family history. Fortunately, it's very unfortunate. Of things like that. Of something like that occurring in his family, where there was something going on in his extended family that he briefly told me about when I was at dinner with him one day, many many years ago. It was very sad to learn about that. And I actually forgot. I didn't forget that that happened. But for a long time, I forgot that he worked for the government. He worked with the government, the United States government. I forgot for a long time, and I was trying to figure out why he would ever try to frame me with a coloring book specifically in my own house. And we're going to talk a lot about things. Um, Dave Withers tried to frame me with a coloring book because he has a history of that unfortunate shit in his family. Very unfortunate. And in addition to that, um, because I'm fairly certain that he was actually part of the process of capturing, identifying and capturing the individual in his family who was involved with um, something terrible by way of children, an adult being involved with something terrible by way of children. Um, when I found out that he tried to frame me in my own house, what that did to my mental health for the rest of my, for ever since I found out, um, was incredibly destructive. Um, and part of why I say that, the full reason why I say that is because I haven't been able to feel safe in my place of living since I found out that somebody tried to frame me in my place of living, specifically with a coloring book to try to make it look like I was some sort of child predator in some way, somehow. And I suspect that when he did this, he had the the cameras and the surveillance equipment that was part of that circumstance turned off. That was in my house, the cameras and the surveillance equipment that was in my house. I suspect that he had that stuff turned off when that was something that was being attempted, with my life. And so because of that, um, I haven't been able to feel safe in my place of living since. And I lived in a cabin after that, um, briefly. I also lived with a couple of roommates before that. But I lived in a cabin after that eventually, and I actually became more and more paranoid, um, as I lived in that cabin for longer and longer. To the point where I fled that cabin across state lines to go live with a friend of mine. Well, I didn't go live. I wasn't intentionally going there to live with him. It's just that that was the circumstance that I found myself in, completely trapped. Which was not what I wanted, but that's what happened. And that lasted for about 6 months in a circumstance that I felt like I couldn't get out of that garage that I was living in without potentially jeopardizing my own freedom again. Because I figured that if he tried to frame me once in where I lived, if I went out and got a job anywhere, he would try to frame me when I was gone, working again. And when I was there, I called him, and that's when he called me insecure and mentally disturbed. I asked him about Heather and her safety. He said that he never spoke to her. He said that he didn't speak to Heather at all, which I knew was a lie. There were other pieces of the conversation that we had, but he called me insecure. He called me mentally disturbed. He knew where I was. He knew what I was going through. He knew I was stuck in a garage. He knew all of these things. But before all of that happened, he also, when I was on the phone with him, he also tried to take credit for Patricia Patton, my ex-wife's mother, and all of her success in life after he had abandoned her entirely. He tried to take credit for her becoming a lawyer and becoming an author. While he was on the phone with me, he completely abandoned her and Heather for over 30 years. And Heather was somebody who, he abandoned her while she was asking him to show up to therapy as a child. That was the last time that he ever spoke to her as a child, until he reappeared in her life as an adult. And when I was talking to Dave, back before I fled my cabin, after I had reported Xena Shrek, and Xena Shrek is in prison, Dave actually called me after a certain point and told me in a roundabout way that they had spoken to her, that they had discovered materials that she had. He also was, in a roundabout way, taunting me, or he was playing with me. He was toying with me about the green language that I was writing in my phone. And at one point, I had written something about Sirius, and I had written something about the green language around the word nose, the words nose, and dogs and things like that. And he was toying with me and said, "Well, yeah, just follow your nose." Because he was toying with me. He was calling me a dog. He was calling me a dog. He was toying with me in the fact that he could see my phone, the fact that he was obsessing over my green language and everything else. And it took me a while to see how obsessive he actually really was, and what it actually really meant to him, in terms of trying to find a way to profit, trying to find a way to collect power, to gain power with everything that I was writing in my phone, which was a fair bit, with everything that I was reporting in my phone. I also put at least one other, if not two other people, one other person in jail for being a child predator. As well as, before that, I had posted a lot of stuff on my Facebook many years before that, about the Trump campaign and seeing through the Trump campaign and dismantling the Trump campaign. I also wrote about music and posted about it on my Facebook. I wrote about a lot of stuff on my laptop. I wrote about a lot of stuff. I wrote about stuff when I was in San Diego on my laptop about Pepsi. I know he's frothing at the mouth about that as well. Dave is somebody who wants to exploit me. Dave is somebody who has no merit to offer. He's somebody who has no merit to offer in his pursuit of power. None of his own merit. None. Um, his pursuit of power is all about collecting things from me. And we're talking about a man with the judgmental capacity of, I'm going to abandon my children for 30 years. I'm going to abandon their mother for 30 years. And then when I come back, I'm going to pretend like nothing's happening. I'm also going to pretend like I'm the reason why the women that I abandoned, who I also lied to about a vasectomy before I abandoned her, I'm the reason why she ever found any success in life. That's what he thinks of himself. And I've been living with a lot of hatred, emotional violence, a capacity for extreme emotional violence for him. They've also taunted me about astrology and anarchy many years before. Or, well, like about a year or two before when I was on the phone with him. To the point where he made an enemy. He was trying to make an enemy out of me. He was. And Dave doesn't care about any of that. In fact, Dave is actually a really, really greedy person. I do regular tarot readings of Dave, particularly when I know he's listening through my laptop or my phone. And I get nothing but the greed card. Almost every reading I do. When I do a reading about Dave, it's about his attitude towards me, his intentions towards me. The greed card comes up at least 7 out of 10 times. Because Dave is somebody who wants to take and take and take and take and take, and he also thinks that he's the correct person to actually handle information and actually handle information that he could use to go seek power in the world. He's a bad man. He's a bad person, effectively, is what I'm saying. I think that Dave is actually a pretty closeted evil guy who has the ability to convince himself and others that that's not who he is. In addition to that, he's tried to threaten me. He's been collecting information about me for a long time, including information about, my past, the things that I did or did not struggle with, how I struggle with them, when I struggle with them, why I struggle with them. Things about things that I've overcome. The mental processes that I went through to address my unhealthiness that led to fitness and wellness and health and physical health and everything. Every piece of my family history he's been through as much as he possibly can. He's wrung out as much information from my brother and my mother and probably my extended family about me as much as he can. Probably information about them as well. Information about my friends globally. Because Dave is very power hungry. He's a very greedy man. He likes to pretend that it's for me or for anything other than himself, but it's not. It's about Dave. And ultimately, I suspect that that Dave is somebody who, because he is who he is, and because he is who he is in the context of my life historically, because he knows I had an affair, because he knows that I see through him, because he knows that I saw through the man that sexually assaulted my ex-wife and had murderous intention towards her and then had murderous intention towards me and probably still does. And because I read that man's mind and have read Dave's mind pretty clearly for a long time as well without even really speaking to him honestly, because he's never been honest with me on the phone. To the point where, well, I'm about to lose time, so I'm going to do another video.